I'm sure most of you know me, but for those of you that don't, I'm Victoria Steele, the Superintendent at Lloyds Pharmacy and the Vice Chair of the Community Pharmacy Patient Safety Group. Moving quickly onto the next slide. These slides have been taken from the Lloyds Pharmacy kind of patient safety headlines, the deck that we presented to the board. And we wanted to share widely some of the work that we did in 2020 around LASAs. So if you rewind to 2019, you'll all remember as part of PQS, there was a significant amount of LASA work done. And we realised at Lloyds Pharmacy that our leading LASA was different to everybody else's. And I wanted to delve a bit further into that. I think it's a great example of not waiting to learn from tragedy. I'm not a great fan of that, and I'm sure neither are any of you. So it was a really good opportunity to review our data and focus our efforts appropriately within the organisation. So if we just move forward a couple of slides, we learned that Amlodipine and Amitriptyline were the top two drugs with our highest patient safety incidents. So nearly 50% of our LASA errors were between these two drugs. And so we highlighted that was the highest risk for us at Lloyds Pharmacy. And so I wanted to understand what we could do differently and what I needed to do to challenge the business. So many of you will know at Lloyds Pharmacy that we run a patient safety conference every year. Our patient safety programme is called Safer Care. And as part of the conference, I wanted to give our colleagues a really big challenge. So I asked them to eliminate amitriptyline, amlodipine LASA errors over the following 12 months. So at the conference, my team ran a workshop where we worked with 100 branch-based colleagues to understand the best, most appropriate actions in branch that would help us be able to achieve that goal. So out of the workshop came a number of mandatory and supplementary actions that we decided to take. None of it's rocket science, all very simple, and I'll talk you through what we did. So we had a number of mandatory actions that we wanted every colleague in every branch to perform. So very simply, our first action was moving our amitriptyline to Y in our dispensaries. And to be honest, I'm not a massive fan of moving stock. However, I did wonder if one of our problems was our layout of the dispensary. So was very comfortable that this was one of our mandatory actions. We then took mandatory action 2. We then took, we actually took this idea from our outpatient dispensing units. So we use a stamp with some of our high risk oncology drugs where we have to know who has picked, labelled, dispensed and checked the prescription. So we took this idea and every single branch received a LASA stamp for them to use on all their amlodipine amitriptyline prescriptions. And as an aside, it became clear that a number of our super duper patient safety focused branches that take everything a step further became really clear that they utilised it on all their LASAs, not just their amlodipine amitriptyline scripts. And then our third mandatory action was a safer care learning zone. So our teams all have a safety huddle once a month. We we always send them out a Safer Care case study to perform. However, they are allowed to use that time if they've had an incident in their branch that they want to talk about. But we, throughout the year, make a number of our briefings mandatory, and this was one of them. So all of our colleagues had to perform this action. And then we asked them to pick their favourite 2 or more supplementary actions that they were going to commit to. Now, I won't talk you through all of them in detail, but to highlight what they each were. So we had LASA stickers made to be affixed to the dispensing baskets for those that contained amlodipine or amitriptyline. We assigned baskets for the putting away of stock so that they were segregated clearly before the stock went away on the shelves. Daily checks of stock locations for amlodipine and amitriptyline, and also the use of clear bags for amlodipine and amitriptyline, not dissimilar to how we would dispense our CDs or our fridge lines, and I'm sure many of you do that as well. And then we took some further actions, so not necessarily at branch level. So we amended our near-miss logs to include whether they were included a LASA. We did a LASA review as a part of the near-miss review. LASAs became part of the compulsory week 4 Safer Care briefing. We added a question to our professional standards audit, and we also incorporated an element into our SOPs. So that was kind of over and above everything that we were doing at branch level. And all of those have been completed throughout the year. So following our conference in November 2019 and the launch of the challenge in December 2019, the team wrote a really comprehensive roadmap with a constant drumbeat for us throughout 2020 to really focus on driving these errors to 0. But as we all now know, March arrived along with COVID, and along with everybody else on this call, we spent quite a few months with our minds elsewhere. But the end of June, beginning of July last year, we relaunched our challenge. Now, I've got to, at this point, give my team a huge thank you and a mention who never let go of the plan, just tweaked the roadmap and tenaciously kept our branches going with the challenge. So importantly, what did we find? That's the most important thing out of all of this. I think at the end of 2019, my team were quite surprised with how dramatic the challenge that I'd set the organisation was. However, I was in the mind that if I gave us a crazy challenge to remove an error, that even if we got somewhere close, the amount of improvement that we would have covered would have been brilliant. So I think if we move on to the next slide, we will, and the slide after that, you'll start to see our results. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the top line is our errors from 2019. And then you can see on the bottom line, the reduction in errors throughout 2020. Unfortunately, I haven't taken the graph to December, because in December we had no amlodipine amitriptyline errors. So in my mind, we achieved exactly what I challenged the organisation to do in removing errors, removing these errors from the organisation. However, the reality is that we reduced the errors by 77%, which is unbelievable in my mind. I had no idea we would get over the 75% mark. And then something that I found really interesting as well is that we've gone through every single one of those errors through 2020, and not one of them caused harm to a patient. They're clearly not okay, but none of them caused any harm. Nothing had to go for an insurance claim, and when we worked out financially the difference between the 2 years, the difference is tens and tens of thousands of pounds. Whilst I know maybe not, we don't necessarily talk about money very often, but it's certainly, I found it a really interesting stat, following on from none of our patients came to any harm through those errors. So if we move on to the next slide, the other things that we discovered was that in 2019, we have 16 pharmacies that had 2 or more errors of this nature, and in 2020, we had none. And in total, the amlodipine and amitriptyline errors, not necessarily the mix-ups, reduced enormously with the focus on these drugs. So 53% from an amlodipine point of view and 42% from an amitriptyline point of view. And then again, really interestingly for me on the next slide, we saw a halo effect with our other top LASA errors. So we had a reduction of 35% in our other top errors, which I found fascinating. So just to round up with our work, clearly I've revisited this slide deck, which was presented, I think, first off in January, February in the organisation. So I've had some further reflections. So from a Lloyds Pharmacy point of view, I'm unashamedly making 2020 year 1 of what I'm now calling the Lloyds Pharmacy Error Reduction Programme. We've had furthermore, we've kind of had a good look at our data following on from this, and focusing our attempts at reducing errors in a much more data-driven fashion. So that is, number of people affected and harm caused or possible harm caused to those patients, which has meant at Lloyds Pharmacy that we're focusing this year on transfer of medicines to patients errors, and also errors with community dosage systems. And then kind of my final roundup really is that, it was actually incredibly simple. The number of good ideas that we took from other parts of our business or processes that we've used to such good effect, the time we took to engage our colleagues and for them to let us know what would actually benefit them in branch, and that there's actually no rocket science to it all, and it's all completely repeatable across any organisation. I'm a big fan of keeping it simple, and I really reflected that in Mike's presentation when he was saying when things go wrong to go back to utter basics around aviate, navigate, communicate, and I'm really proud of this piece of work. I'm really proud of my team, and I'm really proud of the focus that our colleagues in branch performed with this, particularly bearing in mind what 2020 had in store for all of us. Carey, that's the end of my presentation.
Thanks, Victoria. That's absolutely brilliant. And frankly, the impression I get is it's the pharmacy equivalent of the Red Arrow's formation analysis. The picture that Mike showed, where you immediately thought, well, that's pretty good, but actually a little bit of adjustment here and there means that you can get even better. And I think the process is exactly, the simple processes can be completely employed in what you've done. In other words, why has it happened and how can we improve, and getting everyone involved in finding the solution. And that really is all that's to it. It's no more complicated than that. But doing that well is the challenge. And I think that's important. I've got one question for you, actually, Victoria, which is there an opportunity to work jointly with the NHS and the community pharmacy to review LASA errors and produce standardized work, for example, toolman lettering?
Yeah, I mean, we would always want to work with the NHS from a patient safety group point of view, because you have to, I think, unless you're in the group, it's hard to appreciate how much sharing we all do across the group. So to then be able to do some collaboration around some standardisation would be amazing.
Okay.